As long as the wound of your inner child remains unconscious, it won't just govern your emotions. It will choose love for you, fear, even silence, and you'll call it personality, when in reality it's just protection. What if what you call anxiety is really your inner child asking to be heard? Have you ever tried so hard to please others that you forgot about yourself? What if I told you that the voice that judges you the most isn't even yours? That this inner pressure, this constant fear of failing, of not being enough, of not being seen, wasn't born with you? That what you think is your personality might actually be the echo of a little girl who was once ignored, misunderstood, hurt, and never heard again? Maybe you're not too emotional. Maybe you're just someone who learned to silence her feelings until she couldn't anymore. Maybe you're not broken. You're just tired of pretending that nothing hurts. Because the deepest pain isn't the one that screams. It's the one that whispers in silence every single day. The one that seeps into your decisions, your relationships, your sleepless nights. The one you can't trace back to a source, but that never truly leaves. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And how many times have you mistaken fate for an unhealed wound? You felt like you don't belong, like you give everything in love and it's still not enough, like you achieve things, but never feel fulfilled, like people tell you you're strong, but inside you're breaking. Sound familiar? It's not a coincidence. You're not crazy. You're not being dramatic. You're living with a part of you that got stuck in time, a part that's still waiting to be seen, to be heard, to be loved unconditionally. And that part is your inner child. No, it's not a metaphor. It's not a self-help concept. It's an emotional reality that lives inside you. And if you don't heal her, she'll end up making choices for you. She's the one who shows up when you can't set boundaries. When you fall apart because someone didn't reply to a message. When you endure the unbearable just to avoid rejection. When you become rigid, perfectionistic, hard on yourself. Because no one ever taught you how to be soft, how to be free, how to be yourself. Your body grows, but the soul stops exactly where it was first wounded. And when the soul stops, life becomes waiting. Waiting to be loved, to be seen, to be validated, without realizing you've spent your whole life looking outside for something only one thing can give you: your own presence. Today, I'm not going to talk to you about surface-level empowerment or offer pretty phrases to soothe your anxiety. Today, we're going to look straight at the wound that doesn't bleed but weighs heavily, at the part of you that screams in silence. What if I'm not enough? And we're going to do something no one ever taught you to do. Listen to her. Stay with me until the end. Because this isn't about healing to be happy. It's about remembering who you were before you forgot who you could be. It's about coming back to you. And I promise that when you hear her voice, you'll finally hear your own. Let me tell you something I've never said out loud. There was a moment in my life when, even surrounded by people, I felt alone. I smiled, I showed up, I functioned, but inside, there was an emptiness I didn't know how to fill. It was as if something inside me had gone dim. I didn't know what it was. I just knew that no matter how hard I tried, nothing felt like enough. No matter how many times someone told me, "You're doing great," I still felt guilty. I still felt like a fraud, like someone who, sooner or later, was going to mess everything up. And then I began to notice a pattern. I surrounded myself with relationships where I had to give everything, just to receive crumbs. Where I stayed silent so I wouldn't make anyone uncomfortable. Where I adapted so much, I lost myself. Until one day, in the midst of a silent emotional crisis, I heard a phrase, "Your inner child is making decisions for you." I didn't understand. How could a past version of me be affecting my present? That's when I started looking inward. And what I found broke me. But it also opened a door I didn't know existed. There she was, my little girl, with eyes full of fear and questions that had never been answered, with a heart full of love that had never truly been received, with a voice so soft that I had learned to ignore it myself. And I understood something that changed me forever. It wasn't my logic sabotaging me. It was my story. It was the echo of every time someone told me, "Don't cry. Don't be dramatic. Don't be so intense." It was the way I learned to suppress my emotions in order to be loved. And maybe you feel it too. That inner disconnection. That contradiction between what you know you deserve and what you accept. Between what you long for and what you repeat. You're not alone. There's a part of you that still hasn't been heard. A part that doesn't need fixing. Just needs to be seen. To be told, you don't have to carry all of this anymore. Today, we're not here to assign blame. We're here to remember the exact moment we began to forget who we were. And when you give yourself that permission, everything changes. Because maybe, just maybe, what you've been searching for out there lives in the part of you that you once shut down just to survive. The hardest part of healing is admitting that what hurts the most comes from within. That the part of you sabotaging your relationships, your decisions, your rest, isn't your enemy. She's your inner child, trying to protect you with the only tools she has. And those tools are often broken. Carl Jung described it with clarity that transcends generations. What is not made conscious appears in your life as fate. And that is exactly what the unhealed part of you does. She leads your life from the shadows, not because she wants to hurt you, but because she was wired to survive. Because she learned very early on that being yourself wasn't enough. That feeling was dangerous. That asking for something was bothersome. That showing up as you truly were could cost you love. So that little girl hid. She put on an adult disguise. She wore the mask of the responsible one, the strong one, the one who could handle it. But inside, she still trembles, still doubts, still waits, still needs. That's the root of self-sabotage. It's not that you don't want to move forward. It's that a part of you learned that moving forward can hurt, because growing meant adapting. It meant repressing your desires. It meant being useful in order to be loved. And now, every time you're about to expand, to set a boundary, to choose yourself first, something inside you pulls back. A voice, soft but powerful, whispers, "Don't do it. They'll leave you. You'll be alone." And it's not just any voice. It's your inner child, the one who was once ignored, criticized, or simply not understood. Look honestly, how many times have you wanted to say no, but said yes, just to avoid disappointing someone? How many times have you sabotaged yourself just when things were going well? How many times have you searched for love in places where there's only pain? It's not a coincidence. It's emotional programming. Your inner child lives in your body. She shows up in the lump in your throat, in the tightness in your chest every time you feel like you're not enough, in the pit in your stomach when someone criticizes you, in the guilt that floods you when you dare to choose yourself. And the most striking part is this: that little girl doesn't want to ruin your life. She wants to save it. In her own way, she believes that if she repeats what's familiar, even if it hurts, you'll be safe. Because at least it's predictable. Because uncertainty reminds her of the time she cried and no one came. The time she needed something and there was no response. The time she showed her emotions and was judged for it. And so, the unconscious takes over. It leads you to repeat the same story again and again, with different characters, but the same wound at the center. That's no coincidence. It's a wound longing to be healed. That's why you attract relationships where you fight to be seen. That's why even the smallest criticism paralyzes you. That's why you push yourself too hard. Because there's a part of you that still doesn't believe she's worthy of unconditional love. The unconscious doesn't operate with logic. It operates through emotion, and it follows one rule only: avoid familiar pain at all costs. And if that means sabotaging your success, your self-worth, your rest, it will. Because in its childlike logic, that's how it protects you. That's how it keeps you safe from rejection, abandonment, betrayal. But today, you are no longer that little girl. Today, you have new tools, new awareness. Today, you can look at that part of you and say, "Thank you for trying to protect me, but I don't need to suffer anymore to feel safe." And that is the beginning of healing. Because when you realize your inner saboteur is really just a poorly trained protector, something inside you softens. You stop fighting yourself. You begin to listen. You begin to see that behind the self-sabotage, there is love. A distorted kind of love, yes, but love nonetheless. And then something magical happens. Judgment turns into compassion, guilt into tenderness, rejection into presence. It's a process, slow, sometimes uncomfortable, but deeply freeing. Because instead of forcing yourself to get over it, you allow yourself to feel it, to look at that little girl who still lives within you, and say the words no one ever said. You're not alone anymore. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to beg for love. That is the moment your inner saboteur stops taking control. Because finally someone is listening. Finally someone is validating her fear. Finally someone is saying, I've got this now. I'm here with you. And that someone is you. There's a truth that's hard to face, but once you see it, it changes everything. It's not bad luck. It's programming. You're not repeating painful relationships because love is always that way. You're repeating what you learned to associate with love when you were a child. You don't push yourself so hard because you're a perfectionist. You push yourself because you learned that you had to do everything right in order to be loved. You're not afraid of rejection because you're insecure. You're afraid because once you were ignored, and it hurt so deeply that your soul decided it would never happen again. So you started building a version of yourself just to survive. A strong version, adapted, functional, a version that learned to detect danger before it arrived, to give in before being abandoned, to stay silent before being judged. But that version wasn't you. It was a strategy, a shield, a protective disguise that became so attached to your skin, you eventually mistook it for your identity. Do you know what's most painful? That so often what you call low self-esteem is really just the voice of a little girl who was never validated. And that voice is still speaking, through your need to be liked, through your fear of setting boundaries, through your urge to constantly explain yourself, as if your existence required permission, as if every emotion had to be justified. But there's something deeper you need to know. Your mind is not against you. Your mind loves you. In its own way, the mind stores memories, habits, automatic responses. And when you're a child, everything you experience gets recorded as absolute truth. If you only received affection when you were useful, your mind learned, I must be useful to be loved. If you were scolded for crying, your mind recorded, expressing my feelings is dangerous. If you were ignored when you asked for something, your mind concluded, my needs don't matter. And now, years later, you're still acting out that unwritten script. You overload yourself to avoid disappointing others. You adapt so you won't make anyone uncomfortable. You sabotage yourself right when something good arrives, because your mind still believes that pain is safer than love. And it's not doing it out of cruelty. It's doing it out of love. A distorted love, but a deep one. Because in its logic, if it keeps you in the familiar, if it keeps you safe inside the pattern, then you won't have to suffer again. What your mind doesn't know is that today you are no longer that child. Today you don't have to earn love. Today you can choose it. Today you can receive it without having to prove yourself. But to do that, you have to face this truth. Everything you haven't healed, you are repeating. Not because you're weak, not because you don't know how to love, but because a part of you is still stuck in the past, hoping that this time, it will be different. And every time someone doesn't see you, it's not just the present that hurts. The past gets triggered. The child gets activated. That little girl who just wanted to be held, who just wanted someone to look at her and say, you don't have to do anything to deserve love. That girl is still there, and she doesn't need more logic. She needs your presence. Today, you can no longer tell yourself it was just a phase. You can't keep rationalizing what was irrational. You can't keep calling it a streak of bad luck when it's actually unprocessed emotional programming. Because when you don't face it, it repeats. And when you face it, it begins to heal. Now that you know it's not you sabotaging yourself, but a part of you that learned to do so out of love. It's time to go deeper, to give it a face, to give it a name, because when you can see the pattern, you can transform it. Carl Jung spoke of archetypes as universal patterns that live within the collective unconscious. And one of the most powerful is the inner child. But that child doesn't always show up in the same way. Sometimes she hides. Sometimes she screams. Sometimes she hides behind perfection. Other times, behind guilt. Each one has her mask, her way of asking for help without words. Do you know which one is yours? Here are some of the most common archetypes that operate from the wound. Read slowly, and if one of them shakes something inside you, it's because a part of you recognizes it. 1. The invisible girl. She grew up feeling like she had to disappear in order to be loved. She didn't make noise, didn't ask, didn't interrupt. Today, it's hard for you to set boundaries. You're afraid to make others uncomfortable. You adapt so much that you forget yourself. Inner voice. I don't want to be a bother. 2. The martyr girl. She learned that love must be earned through sacrifice. That to be loved, she had to give everything. Today, you make choices out of guilt. It's hard for you to receive. You only feel valuable when you're doing something for others. Inner voice. If no one needs me, then why am I here? 3. The perfectionist girl. She only received love when she did everything right, when she was the best, the responsible one, the model child. Today, you live under silent self-pressure. Nothing is ever enough. You punish yourself when you fail. Inner voice. If I make a mistake, they won't love me. 4. The people-pleasing girl. She linked safety with others' approval. She became an expert at sensing what everyone else needed. But she forgot how to listen to herself. Today, you're constantly worried about not disappointing others. You say yes when you want to say no. Inner voice. What matters is that everyone else is okay. 5. The wounded girl. She was rejected for being sensitive, intense, emotional. She learned to hide her vulnerability. Today, you don't trust easily. You're afraid to open up because it means taking a risk. But deep down, you just want someone to hold you without asking questions. Inner voice. No one's going to understand me. 6. The rebel girl. She felt controlled, silenced, limited. So she learned to distrust everything, to live on the defensive. Today, you react with anger or sarcasm. But deep down, all you ever wanted was to feel free. Inner voice. If I don't protect myself, they'll hurt me. And now take a deep breath. Close your eyes for a moment. Ask yourself these questions. What kind of little girl lives inside me? What did she learn about love when she was small? What did she do to feel loved? What parts of herself did she have to hide in order to survive? Let them resonate. Don't try to answer logically. Listen for the first sensation, the first image, the first emotion that appears. Maybe you'll remember a moment, a phrase, a gesture that marked you more than you realized. Don't dismiss it. That's the clue. That's the root. Because that little girl never left. She's still here. And the only thing she wants is to be acknowledged. For someone to finally say, I see your pain. I see how hard you tried. And you don't have to pretend anymore. This is the moment when you stop believing you're broken. And you begin to understand that what you did was survive with what you had, in the only way you knew how, and that, even though it wasn't fair, was deeply courageous. Your hidden archetype is not a sentence. It's a doorway. When you make it conscious, when you dare to name it, when you look at it without judgment, it loses its power over you. Because now you know you're not weak. You know you're not flawed. You know that everything you did, even the self-sabotage, was a form of love, misguided love, but love nonetheless. And today, for the first time, you can choose a different path, not from judgment, but from tenderness. Now comes the most important part of the journey, the moment when you no longer need more answers, just presence. Because healing doesn't begin with a solution. It begins with a decision to stay, not to run, not to distract yourself, not to cover it up with productivity, but to sit with yourself, with your discomfort, with that part of you that still cries softly. And instead of silencing her, listen to her. This is the first real step toward transformation. Not fighting your wound, not arguing with your fear, not trying to change what you feel, but allowing yourself to feel without punishing yourself for it. Do it now. Close your eyes if you can. Place one hand on your chest and the other on your abdomen. Breathe slowly, not to calm yourself, but to come back to yourself. Imagine that little girl is in front of you. You, at 5, 6, or 7 years old, maybe in an old dress, maybe holding a pillow, maybe sitting alone in a corner. She's not there for you to correct her. She's not waiting for you to judge her. She just wants you to see her, to ask her one simple but powerful question. What do you need from me? And now listen. Maybe there won't be words. Maybe it'll be a sensation, an image, a lump in your throat, a tear trying to escape. Let it. Don't hold it back. Don't explain it. Just stay, because that's what she always needed. Not someone to fix her life, not someone to give her advice, just someone who would stay. And today, that someone is you. Healing your inner child isn't about forcing her to grow up. It's about allowing her to exist without fear. It's about giving her a real place in your emotional world, making space in your day, in your body, in your mind, where she can say, "Here, I can just be me." It's looking at her when she wants to cry, and not saying, "It's over." Looking at her when she's afraid, and not saying, "Don't be silly." Looking at her when she feels alone, and not filling her with distractions, but staying with her in the silence. That is love. A love so deep, it doesn't demand immediate change. A love so conscious, it holds space without asking for results. A love so real, it doesn't expect perfection, just presence. And that changes everything. Because when that child finally hears what no one ever told her, when she finally hears an inner voice whisper, "You don't have to pretend anymore. I'm here. I'm not leaving," then something shifts. Not on the outside, on the inside, at the root, where the wound began, where finally tenderness arrives. This is the beginning. And even though it may seem small, it is revolutionary, because a woman who listens to her inner child without fighting her stops reacting. She begins to choose. And that choice, rooted in compassion, is the first true act of emotional freedom. You've listened to her. You're no longer denying her. Now it's time to do something even more powerful. Honor her, because that child is not an emotional burden. She's not a part of you that you need to get over. She is the guardian of your authenticity, the one who knows what unconditional love feels like, the one who remembers what it was like to live without masks. And if today you give her a place, she can become your guide, your emotional compass, the voice that brings you back to yourself when the world tries to make you forget. How do you do that? With a simple, symbolic, yet deeply healing act. Write a letter, yes, by hand, on paper, from your adult self to your inner child, not as a rational exercise, but as a ritual of love. Tell her what no one ever did. You were never too much. It wasn't your fault. You didn't have to earn anything. You were always worthy, even in the chaos. Thank you for surviving. Thank you for still being here. And when you finish, read it aloud, somewhere you feel safe. And let the tears come if they do. They are sacred. They are release. Then, if your body asks for it, you can take one more step. Burn the letter, with respect, with intention, with full awareness that you're not destroying anything. You're letting go of an old story. You're closing a cycle. And in that symbolic fire, you're releasing the shame, the guilt, the pressure. You are freeing your inner child from everything she was never meant to carry. Another way to integrate this transformation is by creating a small symbolic altar, a space just for her. It can be a shelf, a box, a corner of your room. Place a photo of yourself as a child, a stuffed animal, a stone, a flower, something that reminds your soul that she matters, that she won't be forgotten again. And every time you see it, say to yourself, I'm here, and this time, I'm not leaving, because that's what rewires everything. Not a complex technique, not an empty affirmation, but a real, intimate, daily commitment. When you turn your wounded archetype into an ally, you stop fighting yourself. You stop pressuring yourself to heal quickly, and you begin to live with your story, with tenderness. Then, the child no longer screams from the shadows. She begins to sing from the light, and you no longer feel broken. You feel whole, not because everything is fixed, but because at last you know how to be there for yourself. That is the real power, to walk beside yourself, without conditions, without masks, without rushing, only with love. And then something happens, something subtle, but profoundly transformative. There are no fireworks, no big revelation. Just one day, you breathe differently, and you realize that something inside you has already changed. How will you know? It doesn't feel like perfection. Feels like peace. That peace that once seemed impossible. The kind that doesn't depend on everything being okay on the outside, but on finally having something in place on the inside. You start noticing signs, small but powerful. Suddenly, you set a boundary without guilt. You say no, and don't feel the need to explain yourself. You no longer exhaust yourself trying to prove your worth, because now you know it, and it shows in your eyes, in your voice, in your energy. You start choosing differently, not from urgency, not from the fear of being left behind, but from the calm of someone who no longer needs to beg for love. You find yourself enjoying without guilt, resting without needing to justify it, letting yourself cry without fighting the emotion. There are days when the old pattern tries to come back, but you don't react the same way anymore. You see it, you recognize it, and you choose differently. That is integration. It's not that your inner child disappears. It's that she no longer rules from the wound. Now she walks beside you, and when she cries, you hold her. And when she's afraid, you give her words. And when she doubts, you remind her, I'm here. I'm not leaving. Your body feels it too. It relaxes more. It no longer tenses every time you have to make a decision. Your throat doesn't tighten as much when you speak your truth. Your shoulders no longer carry it all. And the most beautiful part, you no longer have to force your energy to be accepted. You no longer feel like you need to prove your worth. You simply are, and being becomes enough. That's when you know something has shifted. Because when your inner child feels safe, you become a home for yourself and for others, not from sacrifice, but from wholeness. And that can't be faked. It's felt. It's lived. It becomes part of you. That's the most real kind of transformation. Not the kind you can see, but the kind that holds you from within. Now you know. You can't say you didn't see it. You can't pretend you didn't hear her voice. That child, that deep, sensitive, radiant part of you, has been waiting all this time. And today, you finally touched her. Not with theories, not with explanations. You touched her with your presence. And that, even if it seems simple, is the most transformative thing you can do for yourself. Because a woman who chooses herself, who holds herself, who listens to herself, stops begging for love. A woman who looks at her inner child with tenderness becomes a home, a root, a free soul. And yes, there will be days you forget, days when the pressure comes back, the doubt, the old voice. But now you have a new voice, yours, the one that says, today, I stay with myself too. Today, I'm here for me. Today, I am enough, even with fear, because it's not about never falling. It's about holding yourself before you get back up. It's about no longer running from yourself, no longer hiding just to fit in. It's about letting yourself live in every part of your soul, even the ones that hurt, even the ones that tremble. And then, little by little, without forcing it, your life changes, not because the world is different, but because you live in it with more truth. You no longer choose from the wound. You no longer react from scarcity. You no longer silence what feels wrong. You no longer carry what isn't yours. You are you, more you than ever, closer, more alive, more free, and that is felt, that is seen, that inspires. So today, I want to invite you to do something. Write in the comments which part of you you're going to lead with today. What emotion will you validate? What boundary will you honor? What inner child will you hold? And if this message touched something inside you, if a part of your story felt seen, share it, not for likes, not for numbers, but because out there's another woman who doesn't yet know what you just remembered. And maybe today is the day she comes home. Subscribe to this channel, not to fill your mind, but to keep nourishing your soul. Here, we don't talk about magic solutions. We talk about you, your process, your truth, your inner child, who today, at last, is no longer alone. Thank you for making it this far. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for staying with yourself. Because when you choose you, the world begins to choose you too.